Masithandaze. Almighty God, where you have called us to govern this province, we ask your help to make decisions and laws that will be just and will promote the interests of the people. On magtige God, ons bid dat u gedrende ons vergadrings, ons dino dege wijsheid sal gee en ons motieve sever sal hou. En dat u ons sal help om ons tekortkominge te oorkom en al ons besluite aan u op te dra. Sikelela ilizwe lethu nabantu balo. Nkosi umisele ukulunga kwiphondo lethu. Nkosi sikelela iAfrika. Gcina abantwana bayo. Khokhela Nkosi inkokheli zayo. Yinike uxolo Nkosi iAfrika. All this we beg in your most holy name. Amen. Masihlale phansi. You may be seated. Good afternoon, honorable members. Welcome. Chief Whip, I recognize you. Not gonna say.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the motion as printed on the order paper in my name.
Thank you, Chief Whip. Now the Secretary will read the order of the day.
Consideration of the principle of the Western Cape Adjustment Appropriation Bill B6 2019.
I've got the speaker's list and the Honorable Minister of Finance, Minister Mania.
Thank you, Speaker. The medium-term budget policy statement tabled earlier this week outlined how we will ensure the effective, efficient and sustainable management of our public finances so that people are safe, so that people have jobs, and so that people have access to opportunities in the Western Cape. I made the point that we are in deep economic trouble. What should be going up is going down, and what should be going down is going up in South Africa. We have stagnant economic growth, collapsing revenue collection, ballooning expenditure, zombie state-owned enterprises, staggering levels of national debt, eye-watering debt services costs, and terrifying fiscal risks, together with looming junk status in South Africa. The fact is that if we do nothing, national debt measured as gross loan debt will be 3.6 trillion rand, or 64.9% of GDP in 2021, or 4 trillion rand, or 68.5% of GDP in 2021-22, and 4.4 trillion rand, or 71.3% of GDP in 2022-23. And debt service costs will skyrocket to 232.8 billion rand in 2021, 264.6 billion rand in 2021-22, and a staggering 299.1 billion rand in 2022-23. Which means that if we do not stabilize national debt, we will be spending a staggering 299 billion rand on debt service costs alone in 2022-23, which is 36.3 billion rand more than we will spend on education, 76.4 billion rand more than we will spend on healthcare, and 22 billion rand more than we will spend on social development this year, 2019-20, in South Africa. And we are in this situation, Speaker, because national government has mismanaged our economy, mismanaged our public finances, and mismanaged our state-owned enterprises in South Africa. The fact is that the biggest threat to provincial economic growth is national government in the Western Cape. We simply cannot be competitive when our ports, when our rail network, when our visa regime, and when our electricity supply is mismanaged by national government. We all know that national government can put provinces under administration, but the fact is that if provinces could put national government under administration, we would have done it long ago in South Africa. Speaker, I also made the point that the Minister responded to the full horror of this situation in his medium-term budget policy statement and penciled in what he called large reductions to provincial transfers in South Africa. The fact is that total provincial transfers in the form of provincial equitable share and conditional grants will be cut by a staggering 20.3 billion rand over the medium term between 2020-21 and 2022-23. I made the point that we should make no mistake that these budget cuts risk wiping out service delivery on the front line, on education, on health, and on social development across provinces in South Africa. And what makes these budget cuts so hard to swallow is that provincial governments are expected to absorb the budget cuts so that national government can bail out zombie state-owned enterprises in South Africa. I made the point that because of this, there's significant and unprecedented uncertainty. And because of all these known unknowns in the budget process, we would continue to implement our fiscal strategy to focus on proper expenditure management, proper revenue management, and to maintain a balanced budget. We would continue to apply the principles of allocative efficiency, fiscal sustainability, fiscal consolidation, and fiscal discipline, and we would continue to do so that we maintained stability, credibility, and transparency when it comes to the budget in the Western Cape. I made the point that we would assume a worst-case scenario and have planned a total downward adjustment to the provincial budget over the medium term of 5% or 2.67 billion in 2020-21, 6% or 3.4 billion in 2021-22, and 7% or 4.19 billion in 2022-23. That we would commit to minimizing the impact of budget cuts on education, on health and social development, and that we would commit to minimizing the impact of budget cuts on the maintenance and repair of existing infrastructure, all the while continuing to maintain a balanced budget in the Western Cape. I also made the point that we are in the fortunate position of being able to minimize the impact of these budget cuts on education, on health and on social development only because we have built up reserves for unforeseen and unavoidable expenditure and for fiscal stabilization in the Western Cape. But, Speaker, despite the budget cuts and despite the uncertainty and despite all the known unknowns, we have, despite that, developed a Western Cape safety plan aimed at boosting law enforcement capacity in the least safe neighborhoods in the Western Cape. And we will, over the next 12 months, be partnering with the City of Cape Town to train and deploy 1,000 law enforcement officers, providing us with boots on the ground to fight crime, especially violent crime in the Western Cape. We have listened to the victims of crime, and we have heard the victims of crime, and we have found 1.3 billion rand to fight crime, especially violent crime
Order,
in the
honourable
Western
members.
Cape.
Please proceed, Honourable Minister.
Speaker, we are committed, even in this challenging time, where so many people have lost hope and when so many people have lost trust in government, to actually getting things done in the Western Cape. In the end, the fact is that the politics, the high priests of economic madness, who want land expropriation without compensation, who want to impose prescribed assets, who want to establish a state bank, and who want to nationalize the Reserve Bank, are killing the economy in South Africa.
Order, honourable
The fact
members.
is that if we continue like
Minister,
this, the
Honourable
high
Minister.
priests of economic madness.
Honourable Minister, will you please take your seat? I recognize the Deputy Chief Whip.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, I am not able to hear the Minister delivering his speech. Can you please protect the Speaker?
Order, honourable members. I think at this stage I need to request the Chief Whips and the Deputy Chief Whips of various political parties. And because the reason why I'm asking now, honourable members, please just bear with me. On both sides of the house, I'm getting this conversation, and it's very much loud. And that's why we can't hear what the minister says, Honourable Mitchell. So I'm going to really ask that members do cooperate with the presiding officer. I now recognize the minister.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker. In conclusion, I was saying, the fact is that if we continue like this, the high priests of economic madness who like to fight the struggle from the beaches and from the bars of Havana, all the while soaking up on their favorite authors, Marx, Lenin, and Guevara, will get what they have always dreamed of and turn this country into the equivalent of Venezuela. I thank you.
Thank you, honourable members. Thank you, honourable minister. Order, honourable members. I now recognize the honourable minister of community safety, Honourable Fritz.
It's also Marx who said, it was John Lennon who said, know your Karl and know your Marx and your Lennons. So it's very interesting from the finance minister to talk about. That was John Lennon who said, know your Marx and your Lenin. Honourable Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Premier, Cabinet colleagues, Honourable Leader of the Opposition, Cameron Dagmore, let me name him by name, otherwise you know. Honourable members of the Western Cape Parliament, citizens of the Western Cape. Honourable Speaker, as with all other departments across government, my department has had to execute its mandate within an increasingly constrained economic environment. However, I wish to welcome this adjustment budget from the outset, as it speaks to both recovery and hope for the Western Cape. On the 26th of November, Minister Mayne tabled the medium-term budget policy statement and the 2019 adjustment estimates of provincial revenue and expenditure in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. In support of building safer and cohesive communities in this province, an additional 130 million has been allocated in the 2019-2020 period for the law enforcement advancement plan, also referred to as Boots on the Ground. The project forms part of a larger transversal safety plan led by Premier Alan Winde of this, and the Premier of this provincial DA government, not ANC, DA government. This was made possible by reducing my department's budget by 17.97 million, comprising of a transfer of 3 million made to the Department of the Premier for the development of software systems for the safety project. It was further assisted in the surrendering of funds to the provincial treasury. Can I just continue? Can I continue with my
Please
speech?
proceed, Honourable Minister.
Okay, can I go on? It was further assisted in the surrendering of funds to the provincial treasury through the reprioritization of internal projects to contribute 14.97 million towards funds received. And by doing so, Mr. Speaker, we were allocated 130 million in the adjustment budget for the 2019-2020 year and 417 million in the 2020-21 year, 350, listen carefully, 350 million in the 2021-22 year, and 400 million in the 2022-23 year. Let me repeat, listen carefully, ha 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 ha. Remember that. Now, 1.3 million, 1.3 billion towards the implementation of LEAP over the next 4 years. We all know who was the famous man who did that, or notorious man. Honorable Speaker, this budget will provide oxygen to the Premier Safety Plan announced on the 19th of September 2019. As I am sure the House is aware, the safety plan aims to halve the murder rate over the next 10 years. As part of the safety plan, each minister has been allocated the apex priority, which they will be personally accountable for and report on during the safety cabinet that will be held every 6 weeks. We still making finalization around that. My particular apex priorities include: 1, overseeing and the training and deployment of additional law enforcement officers, and 150 investigators to the places and the places and times where and when violent crimes happens. I think that's a very important point. Working to expand the Chrysalis Youth Academy programs. 3, enhancing police oversight. 4, working to change legislation to reduce alcohol-related harms. And 5, implement the Boys to Men program, also again with the partnership of Chrysalis. As Honorable Nkondlu has correctly noted, that we cannot address crime without firstly addressing the social factors which perpetuate it. I completely agree. That is why the Premier Safety Plan will not only put additional boots on the ground, but will also be accompanied by various social interventions focusing on the 10 gang stations, and it will work to expand the highly successful Chrysalis Youth Academy within these communities. As the Western Cape government, we have been hard at work implementing the contents of the safety plan since its announcement. In fact, each Monday we meet and make progress strides in implementing the plan. That's called a work in progress, comrade. I am proud to announce that my department is currently in the process of appointing its own high-level project manager who will ensure that the critical priorities that I have listed above are implemented. Yeah, we have to give him a job. He needs a job. I wish to commend all actors who have played a significant role over the past few months to bring peace and stability to our province. We have started to see murder figures, particularly within the Cape Flats, stabilize. The increased perception of safety in our province is happening. This did not happen overnight or incidentally. It comes from collective, integrated approach to safety. Honorable Speaker, thank you to all media, civil society, safety agencies such as SAPS, law enforcement, and Metro Police, South African National Defence Force, and good citizens who have played a part in making a safer Western Cape. Those civil society organizations include neighborhood watches and CPFs. I wish to remind the House that while the Premier Safety Plan will particularly focus on reducing the murder rate within the identified hotspots, my department will continue to implement and roll out its safety plans throughout the province. On the 8th of November 2019, I met with the executive mayors of each district municipality. This is the Honorable Maran, each district municipality. This gave municipalities an opportunity to give feedback on the progress made in implementing their safety plans. I'm pleased to note that my department aims to have all remaining district safety plans prepared by the end of December. It should be noted, honourable members, and with absolute attention, that while the DA-led Western Cape government has quite literally reprioritized itself to make the province safer, and I think that's one of the reasons why the President and the Deputy President likes this Premier, because we do things, we don't talk about things. And for that, to make it safer so that all of us can live safely in this province, other than our ANC-led provinces who are continuing to ignore the crucial issues of crime. Make no mistake, honorable members, crime is an issue which affects the whole of South Africa. In fact, in many crime categories, the Western Cape remains safer than many other provinces. Shame on the ANC for continuing to subject those it governs to suffering and not prioritizing
Order,
their safety
honorable
plans.
members.
I thank you, Honorable TV.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I now recognize Honorable Mvimbi.
Somlomo ndiyabulela ngelithuba ndilifumeneyo. Somlomo ndiyabulela ngelithuba unike lona. On the 26th November, a day after the President launched the 16 days of activism against abuse of women and children, the MEC of Finance tabled his medium-term budget policy statement under the theme, "We are getting things done in the Western Cape." Anyone can see through these blue lies, that there is nothing getting done here, except for maintaining the status quo. Nothing is getting done except for maintaining the status quo, preserving white supremacy, preserving white power, and preserving white privilege.
The writing is on the wall. The writing is on the wall.
Order, honorable members. Please proceed, honorable member.
The writing is on the wall. Kubo.
The MEC's habitual criticism of national government and investments, like the national health insurance, must be condemned with the condemned it deserves. The MEC must know that he is responsible for the province of the Western Cape. He must concentrate on the province of the Western Cape and govern the Western Cape and leave the national government alone. In addition, his disinvestment in frontline services department like education, health, and social development must equally be condemned.
Failing department that
Those learners at Federal Primary School in Fuleni who are learning under inhumane conditions must accept that their condition will not change, because the habitual critic whose mind is preoccupied with zombies is cutting the budget of education. Upon indlela endikhule ngayo ke Somlomo into bangaba umuntu osoloko ethetha ngizithunzela inoba mhlambi ngumuntu inoba mhlambi uligqirha okanye uligqirha. So ke ngoku kufuneke akhethe umphathisi ubangaba uyephi na kwezo zinto.
Will you please take your seat, honorable member? Honorable Mitchell.
Honorable Speaker, I'm rising to ask for your ruling. Is it parliamentary for a member to use his cell phone to record while there's a speaker on the floor?
which role?
Thank you, Honorable Mitchell. Who's there? Will you guide the speaker? Who's that member?
If my eyes are not misleading me, it's Honorable Moran.
You must also deal with your eyes. Check your role.
Speaker. May I, honorable members, can there be one presiding officer at a time? So that if we vote for you, you sit here, but if it's me now, please let us respect that.
You must provide proof.
Honorable Maran, you wanted to say something
Are you acknowledging me, Speaker?
regarding the recording?
I'm just saying, Speaker, if you said I was recording, you must submit you with proof. The Deputy Chief of the day, the one who stood up. It's he who's making the accusation. Can he provide you with proof, Speaker?
No, point of order.
Chief Whip, please take your seat, Honorable
The
Maran.
member is entering into an explanation, which I don't think is required. He's also pointing fingers at the member across the way, which I don't think is parliamentary.
Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip.
Speaker, this is a pencil, not a finger. It's my pencil. It's a pencil, not my finger. So you must not make
Honorable Maran.
accusations, Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable Maran, we're dealing with a serious matter. I just want to know whether were you recording the member, yes or no?
Speaker, no. That's why I'm saying
take
the
your
person who's making the accusation must submit proof to you as the speaker.
Please take your seat, all right.
Not just speak and make wild accusations.
Please take your seat, Honorable Maran. There are rules in this house, and one of them, honorable members, one of the rules I'm addressing the house is that when we talk to members, we don't point at them. And the other rule is that you address the speaker at all times. So can we please respect that principle, Honorable Maran? Now I'm talking to you specifically. The honorable member has said to the House that he did not record, and that then puts the matter to bed. We are now going to proceed. Honorable Mvimbi.
Should I start where I... Okay. Those learners at Fedale Primary School in Fulani who are learning under inhumane conditions must accept that their condition will not change because the habitual critic whose mind is obsessed and preoccupied with zombies is cutting the budget of education. Now, ngokwenkolo ke yesintu endiyaziyo somlomo, umuntu osoloko ethetha ngezithunzela is either uba uligqwirha okanye uligqirha. So ke ngoku uzawufuneka ke umphathiswa azame ukohlula uba ngaba uyeyiphi kanye kanye kwezinto. From the onset, I must state that 60 million rand is not enough to end the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide in the province. Thousands of women have been demanding action. They need more investment into this fight. The government has not only failed to allocate additional funding to end gender-based violence, but is also cutting its spending on important programs like victim empowerment, substance abuse, prevention and rehabilitation, as well as child and youth care centers responsible for assisting youth in conflict with the law. All this is happening while the national government has allocated an additional 59 million for gender-based violence, as well as the fact that the province has over 659 million in reserve, which it can use when it deems necessary. The same national government you keep on criticizing and attacking, but we are always quick to accept its funding. This is simply unacceptable. The provincial government, through its equitable share, has responsibility.
Please proceed, honorable member. Order, honorable members.
The provincial government, through its equitable share, has a responsibility to allocate budget to different programs according to its priorities. And in this instance, the MEC has proved that the above are list of his priorities. But what are his priorities? A layman on the street may want to know. Of course, if you go to the page 9 of the MEC's budget speech, you will see that in there you will see that all other departments have had budget cut except the community safety, health, human settlement, agriculture, and public works.
Honorable Mvimbi, you need to try and conclude.
Speaker, the MEC boldly stood here, dancing like a Pinocchio, the wooden puppet in children's stories, saying that we are getting things done in the Western Cape. I want to spend the last few minutes zooming into that. The provincial government has allocated an additional 130 million and gave the city of Cape Town to fund the DA's aspiration of a provincial police disguised as a safety plan. What is strange is masquerading as a provincial plan, but is only concentrating in the city of Cape Town. Let me hasten to say that the additional resources towards combating violence, crime, and gangsterism are welcomed.
Thank you. Thank you. Honorable Fernandez, I see you raising your hand. Honorable Minister.
Been dealt with, thank you, Speaker.
Oh, thank you. Honorable members, let us proceed. I now recognize Honorable Makamba Potja.
Nkosi Somlomo,
The Western Province continues to experience high levels of unemployment, especially amongst the youth. In the long run, these youth tend to give up hope in ever finding employment, and some resort in criminal activities, abuse of alcohol and drug substance. This is said because the provincial government is failing this youth. This issue of unemployment is further made worse by the provincial government's failure to stimulate the economic development of province to operate at an optimal level so as to attract major investments and create a free platform for small businesses to operate, especially in the urban areas. Coupled with that, then comes the issue of inequality. Early this month, Statistics South Africa released a report showing that Western Cape was leading the pack when it comes to inequality. The report shows that only a handful had huge financial income, mostly white people, whilst the majority remained poor, that is black and colored population. The province is not doing anything about this issue, where whites earn 2 or 3 times more than their colored and black counterparts in the same workplace, in the same positions. It's true. It is further reported that Western Cape had a larger rural population of chronically poor households. This is so because the province does not care about the rural poor and creating economic opportunities for them, as the focus is on the few rich in the city. The same can be said about the provincial department in the Western Cape, which continues to overlook African and colored employees when it comes to promotions to higher levels within the top executive management positions. Moreover, the province continues to fail when it comes to dealing with the issue of traffic congestion, especially within the city of Cape Town. The road infrastructure remains old and slightly developed. According to the recent report by the Transport Director, traffic congestion cost the city of Cape Town 2.8 billion per annum due to goods and services not reached their state destination on time. It also leads to lower job growth as the province becomes unattractive for investment. Furthermore, those hit hard are the poor as public transport remains expensive and unreliable, costing low to medium income households 45% which is spent on public transport. Connected to this is the issue of housing. The Western Cape province is not doing enough in putting pressure on the city of Cape Town to develop an inclusionary housing policy that will see low and medium income households settling in their new developments taking place in the city of Cape Town. Again, the province is failing to manage the issue of drought and job losses in the Karoo. The 50 million that was recently allocated there as a measure of drought relief is not enough to assist farmers to get farmers in order.
Honourable Member.
Thank you, Speaker.
I now, thank you, honourable members. I now recognize order, honourable members. Order, honourable members. I now recognize Honourable Minister of Social Development, Honourable Fernandez.
Honourable Speaker, Honourable Premier, Cabinet colleagues, Leader of the Opposition, Honourable members of the Western Cape Parliament, guests in the gallery, fellow South Africans. Before I begin my presentation, I do want to draw the House's attention to the fact that when the Minister of Finance delivered his speech the other day, some honourable members found it funny. And it's quite sad that they don't realize the extent of the disaster, economic disaster, that this country is facing. We have gone beyond a fiscal cliff. We are, in fact, at a tipping point. A Minister of Finance is to be congratulated on tabling a responsive, sustainable budget for the 2019 MTEF period. In the words of our very capable minister, he said, the medium-term budget is about, and I quote, how we are getting things done in the Western Cape. Honourable Speaker, let's not hide behind any smoke screens. Provincial services are indeed taking strain and are unable to meet the ever-increasing demand because of the rapid increasing population in the province. I've highlighted a few months ago that in the next 5 years, research has proven we will see the Western Cape population grow by a further 700,000 people. However, the only way to fill these gaps and get ahead of the population growth and development curve is if our equitable share allocation is significantly increased and national government stops wasting money on failing SOEs like Eskom and SAA. I've just seen that Eskom is now looking for another 20 billion, above inflation wage increases, bad policy choices such as the NHI and land expropriation without compensation, as well as state capture. Speaker, where other provinces are struggling, we are still managing to show progress in the services we offer the people of our province, especially those who are most vulnerable and at risk across the province. Our government, led by our fit-for-purpose Honourable Premier Alan Winde, remains a shining example of a capable state, while we continue to watch national government imploding and shifting the goalposts set out in the National Development Plan. Honourable Speaker, yesterday a member of the ANC asked, what are we doing in terms of increased support for victims, our victim empowerment programs with regards to GBV? To answer that question, honourable members, I would like to bring some facts to the fore. In the year 2009, when the DA first took over government in the Western Cape, the amount allocated for VP was a mere 7.6 million rand. Honourable members, I have you know that the budget allocation for the same VP program in 2019 is 45 million rand. That is 6 times more than what the previous ANC administration allocated in this province. And let's be honest, the scourge of gender-based violence was a challenge then already. As Minister Mania highlighted in his midterm budget policy speech, we must give credit to national government for the few things that they do get right. After the President, though, announced at SONA, national government has provided financial support that has assisted, I did say the good work, has assisted our government in ensuring that, and listen very carefully, an additional 59.7 million to employ social workers in areas where there is a high prevalence of gender-based violence, substance abuse, and issues affecting children in the Western Cape. This will include provision for capital requirements for the additional 30 social workers as at the 1st of November 2019. An additional 17 million to continue to support efforts to deal with the drivers of HIV, TB and STIs and gender-based violence in the Western Cape. An additional 31.5 million to improve access to sanitary dignity for young women so they can stay in school and get the education they deserve in the Western Cape. However, I would also like to use this opportunity to applaud our Provincial Treasury for working the numbers as well as they did. The Western Cape government is one of 3 provinces that has allocated funding for the Sanitary Dignity Project for the 2019-2020 financial year. I would also like to have you know that our average spend per child in an early childhood development centre is more than in any other province in this country. Another important point is that as a government, we are also providing higher subsidies than all but one other province for children to be placed in child and youth care centres. Regarding the operation of child and youth care centres, we should ask our ANC colleagues across the floor whether or not their counterparts in the other provinces have managed to deal with the Bosasa contracts that came to an end on the 31st of October. I can very reliably say that our province, we have insourced 295 workers, and as at the 1st of November, our 2 centres in Clan William and Horizon were up and running. Speaker, one issue I need to bring to this House's attention, listen and then you can understand, is surrounding the Children's Amendment Bill, in particular the fact that the Department of Social Development nationally has not provided effective solutions to address the foster care backlog after almost 10 years. Our department has been able to manage the foster care placements, but the children's courts are struggling to process orders due to capacity constraints, especially in the Winelands area. Our social workers do not have a backlog, but over 4,888 cases which we have submitted to the courts across the province are still waiting to be processed, of which 3,538 are in the Winelands area. We agree with the Centre for Child Law that it would help if Parliament amended the legislation so that extended family members caring for orphan children can access additional grant funding instead of having these children placed in the foster care system. Speaker, I hope that over the MTEF, there is clarity around the migration of early childhood development centres from the National Department. It is unquestionable that the hard work of ensuring improved access to quality holistic ECD services is much more complicated than a simple shift of location from DSD to DBE. As a DA-led government, we cannot agree or disagree with this possibility of the migration because there is still great confusion and uncertainty at a national level as to when and how this will happen. Honourable Speaker, yesterday a guest in our Adjustment Budget Committee highlighted the need for us to expand our services to those individuals dealing with substance abuse in our poorest communities. Over the MTEF, we will strive to expand our services in this regard. At the end of the day, we must not be under any illusions that one of the main contributors to the scourge of violence and gender-based violence being experienced across our province is fueled by substance abuse. Despite our best efforts, there remains room for improvement. In saying this, though, the DA-led Western Cape government continues to be at the forefront of the fight against substance abuse, focusing on rendering early intervention,
Minister, will you please try and
inpatient
wrap
treatment, and community-based treatment. Honourable Speaker, in closing, I would like to quote Corruption Watch, who says, "Corruption undermines the effectiveness of institutions. It diminishes public trust, and it hinders the realization of human rights. We need to work to stop with corruption." I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister.
Thank you.
You were right on time, Honourable Minister. And now I recognize Honourable Heron.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, the Minister for Finance, Honourable Mania, spoke about the spekboom, and he brought a spekboom into Parliament. In English, the spekboom is the elephant bush. So I think it's quite appropriate because I think there are a few elephants in this room that we need to speak about. The first is the safety plan. Where is it? Speaker, we all agree that we need to work together to support action to reduce crime. And we've heard a lot about the safety plan, but the safety plan doesn't actually exist. This document is not a safety plan. It is not a plan. It is at best an executive summary or maybe a vision. It doesn't tell us what will happen. It just tells us, it tells us what they would like to see happen, but it doesn't tell us how it should happen. But yet this Parliament is asked to support the transfer of hundreds of millions of rands without a plan, without any detail as to where this money will be spent or how it will be spent. The second problem, Mr. Speaker, is also the safety plan. Or more importantly, where is the money? Just a few months ago, the Premier promised 1 billion rand a year would be spent on this plan. On Tuesday, Minister Mania said, we made a promise and we kept that promise. But the budget he spoke about provides 1.16 billion rand over the promised next 3 years. So where's the remaining 60% of the money coming from? Are we expecting the municipalities to be coughing up 2.8 billion rand over the next 3 years? Speaker, the third problem is, and you've guessed it, the safety plan, because the budget adjustments contradict the Minister and the Premier's commitments. Nowhere in this document, Speaker, does any minister or any department refer to the safety plan. Not one. They make no reference to any change in their plans, their programs, or their objectives. This document doesn't mention the safety plan. The only place it's mentioned is the 130 million rand transferred by the Community Safety Department. Thank you,
Honourable Member. Now I recognize Honourable Christians.
Thank you, Speaker. I want to agree with the minister when he said it's the mismanagement of money of national government is concerning, and it places financial strain on provinces and on municipalities. But Speaker, where I do not agree is where he said that Premier Alan Windey made promises to the electorate and delivering. He is not delivering, because he promised on his on the election trail that we will have a provincial police service. Now he comes with a diluted law enforcement safety plan. This baby must be aborted. It's a stillborn baby. It must be aborted. It must be aborted. Let me further say, he went on the election trail to say a provincial railway service. He knew it's not his mandate, and yet he promised the electorate, and he did not deliver on his promises. Now, Speaker, they want to come with a plan that they know it's not sustainable. It will die very, very soon. Why don't they go to Joburg and learn from Joburg? The Metro Police in Joburg is doing a sterling job. You want to reinvent the wheel. Why don't you go and learn from other provinces? Speaker, and then when the minister spoke about, he spoke about Cape Town, in part of Cape Town. Is Cape Town the Western Cape? It's not the Western Cape. We're looking at Worcester, Paul East, Stellenbosch and Oudtshoorn, where there is high numbers of crime. So Speaker, this Metro is not the Western Cape. I think the minister, I'll close, the ministers from Nationals, we don't understand, so we'll assist him that the Western Cape is bigger than just the Metro.
Thank you, Honourable Member, your time is up. I was struggling, Honourable Member, Honourable Members, order. I think I need a separate mic to stop Honourable Christians. Thank you, Honourable Christians. May I now recognize Honourable Nkontlo.
Enkosi Somlom. On this afternoon, allow me to first congratulate the women in the Department of Treasury, led by the acting DG, together with her team of women that have held this department and demonstrated technical prowess in as far as taking up their work. And to say to them, Malibongwe, bangabe abaniboni ngoku, but the future is womandla. While the spekboom can survive frost, drought and fires, no amount of resilience will help it to survive the level of underdevelopment, poverty and unemployment that is endured by the poor working class in the Western Cape. Inequality trends in South Africa released by Stats SA earlier this month showed that the white people earn 3 times more than black Africans on average. According to the Palmer ratio, the highest inequality was observed in the Western Cape, where the top 10% of the population in the province shared 9 times more of total provincial expenditure than the bottom 40. That's a fact, Honourable Mackenzie. This should tell that the resilience of the poor working class in South Africa, especially in the Western Cape, is far better than that of the spekboom. Perhaps the black majority, Africans and colours in particular, who are living in squalor in the Cape Flats and informal settlements are the spekboom, while the others that are benefiting from government business and getting preference for senior government jobs are the feigned boss or the protee of the province. Are you really, Premier and the MEC, prepared and gonna stand here and be proud to oversee an economy that takes us back to the apartheid era? This notion of spekboom and feigned boss is also vivid in the economy and fiscal policy decision contained in this budget. The MEC, when he tabled his midterm budget policy statement, spent more time bragging that we are leading tourist destination in the Western Cape, we have a growing economy in the Western Cape, and actually we are told that others are taking strain And recently we're hearing from the last financial year annual reports to currently that there are COO funds that have been shifted and others surrendered to the Premier's safety plan. So I'm not sure who exactly is taking the strain. Someone has to remind the MEC that economic growth in the province slowed down to 0.2% in 2018 and expected to grow by 0.7% in 2019. This is nothing to brag about, except if you are a faint boss. Of concerning proportion is the average skills profile of the majority in the province, especially in the City of Cape Town planning districts, with Kylie Chamicha's Plain, Honorable Mackenzie, reported to be sitting with about 18 skilled workforce and the rest semi-skilled and low-skilled. In Saldanha, where there is supposedly a huge capital investment to boost the local economy through the Saldanha IDZ, a similar profile with low-skilled being 40% and the other 41.6% is semi-skilled, as they face closure of ArcelorMittal to compound the problem. In the third quarter of 2019, the narrow unemployment rate stood at 21.5%, whilst the expanded unemployment rate is at 24.5%. According to this, there are 8,009 people, majority of whom are black, that are unemployed in the province. How is the medium-term budget policy statement answering to this carnage? The problem is when the dynamism gives rise to dynasticism. Kids of the affluent parents, even if they of mediocre talent, go to the best schools, and talented kids from the less affluent families don't. It is not just a loss for them. That means our society will be less productive. This is damaging, Premier, for the functioning of our democracy, but I actually think also for the functioning of our economy. While the MEC mentioned an amount of 311 million of infrastructure development, how is this capital investment and budget going to change the picture above? To date, we sit with a precarious situation of inefficient procurement strategies, West that produce the same old patterns, white male ownership. The Department of Public Works shared with us how some of these companies are running into liquidity risk, and one submitted itself for business rescue, causing delays in the construction timelines and service delivery. The fiscal discipline chorus must surely change the beat, as good procedures do not always assure good budget outcomes. Due process is indifferent to outcomes, and due process is neutral. The OECD report on fiscal policy and inclusive growth cautions us that rich countries like to credit their good fortune on fiscal discipline, but the true explanation may lie in the economic plenitude, not in budget rules and procedures. Incrementalism used to reward spending so future budgets are guaranteed, not fiscal outcomes, is one of the narratives we ought to change. Worse, the function of allocation is left to one person and the sphere as the instrument to enable this legislature's voice to be effected doesn't exist, and thus we are rendered toothless. True to the tradition of the DA of speaking to left to attract votes and act right, the MEC reiterated the Premier's vision of people living free from want, free from hunger, free from deprivation, and free from fear, whilst he was not made any budget adjustment to address them. Fiscal policy in this province has become less redistributive and mutually exclusionary to a relationship of productivity and inclusive growth. Day zero, like the safety plan, is something that was looking for. And we require to see the safety plan so that we can see how the results of the safety plan can reduce the challenges in the Cape Flats. As I conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, where taxes are dispersed and the tax base is shrinking, we ought to rethink beyond theatrics and start making true the promise that, Premier, you made of a Madiba province where people's circumstances and race shall not define their economic standing. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I see the Honourable Dale Mitchell.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Honourable Deputy Speaker, the International Monetary Fund has concluded its recent visit to South Africa, projecting that the country's economic growth will remain sluggish in 2020. Of the many comments and recommendations made, the following rings true, and I quote, "Failure to implement the needed adjustment in government and SOE spending and efficiency will worsen debt dynamics erode financial stability, and further raise the country risk premium. Honourable Deputy Speaker, this quote speaks directly to the dire erosion of the public trust in the way in which national government is managing the national fiscus. In a country where the tiny minority of taxpayers are deciding to immigrate, where more people live on social grants today than they did 20 years ago, and where trillions of rands have been lost to severe corruption under the ANC, good governance and clean spending are crucial to economic recovery and sustainability. And yet, year after year, president after president, the audit outcomes of our country under the ANC only seems to get worse. The Public Finance Management Act of 1999 is arguably one of the most crucial pieces of legislation when it comes to governance and instilling a sense of trust in government and public servants.
Order.
The Act provides for the sound management of the national fiscus and the allocation and spending of provincial budgets, ensuring that the taxpayer receives the service for which their tax deductions pay. The only way of proving that provincial governments are in fact adhering to this Act is through an analysis of audit outcomes by the Auditor General. With this in mind, I would like to commend the Western Cape government for the Western Cape's stellar performance as South Africa's best-run province for the 10th year running. Where the DA-run Western Cape government has achieved 79% clean audits, the ANC's closest competitor, Gauteng, only received a dismal 30%. I think it's safe to say, Honourable Deputy Speaker, that the ANC has failed outright to uphold the Public Finance Management Act where it governs, and has lost the trust of millions of South Africans as a result. Here in the Western Cape, our outlook could not be more different. It is clear that the DA has not only won over the trust of the residents of this province, but managed to instill a
Order, members. Order, members. You may continue.
It is clear that the DA has not only won over the trust of the residents of this province, but managed to instill a renewed sense of hope in millions of South Africans who remain unconvinced of what the ANC has become. A party which steals from the poor and gives to the rich. On the contrary, here in the Western Cape, taxpayers' money is consolidated and spent on what the people of this province both want and need: services, safety, and opportunity. This is the sense of hope that this government has reignited in people across the country. The IMF has stated that South Africa's vulnerable outlook emphasizes the urgency of rebuilding policy buffers and implementing reforms to put the economy on a sustainable and an inclusive growth path. I stand here very proud to say that the DA has already been doing this for 10 years running, and it shows.
Order.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, I hope my time is being managed.
I am managing.
The Premier's Provincial Safety Plan, for example, Honourable Deputy Speaker, is the appropriation of over 1 billion rand to fund a program to keep our residents safe. Many people may be asking where such a large budget for this safety plan comes from. Well, when public finances are managed so prudently, a government can adapt its budgets to cater to the changing needs of its residents. This is precisely, Madam Deputy Speaker, why sound management of public finances is so important, because it allows a government to be vigilant in the face of change and uncertainty. A government's ability to both plan ahead and plan for unforeseen challenges is rooted in the sound management of public money. This is also how the DA-led Western Cape government has managed to bolster the province's farmers against the worst drought in a century. In terms of Section 25 of the Public Finance Management Act, the Provincial Treasury has allocated 50 million rand in emergency funding for fodder and support and drought-stricken farms across the province. Again, the fact that the DA-led Western Cape government has managed public money so well has allowed us to be vigilant and provide even in times of an emergency. the same, Honourable Deputy Speaker, cannot be said about the ANC at national government. We are still waiting for the promised 147 million rand from National Treasury for drought relief, an amount which is yet to be released to this province, Honourable Deputy Speaker. But we know that the ANC has thrown the Public Finance Management Act out of the window. What is sad, Honourable Deputy Speaker, is that this is not the ANC paying for decades of severe financial mismanagement. It is the taxpayer of this country who continue to foot the bill of billions of rands lost to deeply entrenched corruption and cronyism, severe financial mismanagement, a bloated public sector wage bill, and at the mercy of ANC-aligned unions. This is why, Honourable Deputy Speaker, South Africa can no longer afford to service its debt. This is why South African state-owned enterprises are all in financial turmoil. This is why the South African taxpayer has lost complete trust in our government. Honourable Speaker, this is precisely why the Public Finance Management Act and the audit outcomes are so important, and why the ANC will discredit these results at every turn, because the ANC cannot face the ugly truth that it has run our public finances into the ground. Honourable Deputy Speaker, that is a fact. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I see the Honourable Murray.
Honourable members, the Western Cape Safety Plan and legislative framework to combat crime rests on 4 important pillars: vision-inspired provision, priorities. But like in the case of the biblical Samson, I'm afraid it may come crashing down on us. I therefore have a simple suggestion to the Honourable Premier. Make the leaders of the opposition parties in this legislature part of the team which will draft and negotiate a protocol agreement between the 3 spheres of government. Invite us to assist your cabinet, and let the solution we ultimately will arrive at will be a bipartisan one which will ensure that all the existing cracks and omissions in these pillars are repaired before building commence. Throwing money at this problem is not going to solve it, Mr. Speaker, because crime will simply waste taxpayers' money further. The plan is built on Pillar 1. Pillar 1 says empower the people. Nobody told me how they're going to empower gangsters. Nobody tell me whether they are going to be prepared to take part in whatever we decide we want to do for them. They have the right to say we don't want to be part of it. Priority, Pillar 2, economy and jobs. What happened to our economy? It's in a dustbin status. Unemployment has reached record levels. Even our SOEs are bankrupt. Pillar 3, public transport and mobility. Taxis act like road dogs, and Uber drivers have raped women passengers. Is this the transport system? Buses and trains are being burned to ashes, and our highways have made our suburbs mere dormitories. There's no economic activities in the suburbs to speak of. Pillar 4, innovation and culture. There's only one culture here, and it's an antisocial, racial culture that's developed in this country,
if you can finish
and a gang culture. So I want to say again, invite the opposition. Let us come with a protocol agreement that this whole House will support. Let it not be a DA protocol with national government, but a Western Cape protocol. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Murray. I see the Honourable Dugmore. Honourable Dugmore.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Any decision about the allocation of resources is not easy. It is about choices. And that is why the choices that we make must be transparent in regard to the adjustments and additional allocations being made. As the ANC, we fully support the efforts to make our province safer for everyone, especially those communities most affected by violent crime. And thus, Deputy Speaker, we welcome the willingness of Premier Windi to move away from the blame and complain legacy of his predecessor, a legacy which actually made this province unsafer after 10 years of DA rule. We also welcome the willingness of the Premier to adopt an integrated approach to the fight against crime. However, one would imagine that his budget person, the MEC, would actually embrace and understand what, let's be honest, is not a plan, is actually more of a working document. But it's clear that the MEC for Finance himself does not actually embrace the essence or understand the essence of what is proposed, and that gives us concern. When the Premier announced his provincial safety plan, which I think we must be clear is a working document, not a plan at this stage, he said it would be informed by two key pillars.
Order,
One,
members.
it would amount to boots on the ground, and secondly, that the plan would focus on reducing and preventing violence. In other words, a commitment was made to focusing on the factors that actually contribute to crime, such as unemployment, poverty, inequality, substance abuse, patriarchy, and conflict within families. But, Speaker, yesterday was a day when we were disappointed because the MEC for Finance, in terms of his delivery, and I want to quote, he said, "We will over the next 12 months be partnering with the city to train and deploy 1,000 law enforcement officers, providing us with more boots on the ground to fight crime." Not a word about the second pillar, reducing and preventing violence. Not a cent of new money allocated to the second pillar, reducing and preventing violence. And in fact, to quote him directly again, he then concludes by saying we have found 1.3 billion to support the deployment of 1,000 law enforcement officers to fight crime, especially violent crime. Not a word about the second pillar. So even the MEC of this government does not understand the essence of what the Premier says this plan is all about. There are 10 police precincts in the Western Cape which contribute close to 50% of all murders. These are Nyanga and Samora Machel, Delft, Kailicha, Philippi East, Harare, Gugulethu, Mfuleni, Kraaifontein, Mitchells Plain and Bishop Lavis. Any serious plan would spell out clearly what are the projects, what are the investments, what are the programs which will impact on poverty, inequality and unemployment in those 10 communities. It can never be just about boots on the ground. We need infrastructure investment, investment into local economic development and support for entrepreneurs in these communities, safer schools, street lighting and security cameras. That is why we as the opposition cannot support a budget which actually confirms essentially a boots-only approach and provides no evidence of an integrated approach. As we said, budgets are about choices. If this government was serious about changing the ownership patterns in agriculture in this province, it could have found resources from its reserve to support black and coloured farmers to actually own farms. If this government was serious about changing the ownership patterns of this provincial economy, it could have found the resources to set up an investment fund to support black business from our own provincial reserves. If this government was serious, it could have announced a dedicated fund to boost the quality of social and economic infrastructure in these 10 most affected areas. But a government which admits that there are no social housing projects which have been completed in the inner city and further says that it is not obliged to use Tafelberg site for social housing has no political will to deal with the legacy of apartheid spatial planning. We hope you will prove us wrong, Premier, but the DA that we know is not committed to an integrated approach which actually deals with the causes that lead to crime. And if we are going to only follow a boots-on-the-ground approach, we are doomed to failure. And we appeal to the Premier to be serious and to explain, to give a workshop to his MEC about what you are actually trying to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Member. I see the Honourable Madikizela, Minister.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I do want to, before I deliver my speech, preface it by admitting that the Western Cape is by no means perfect. And the opposition is correct in pointing out the challenges that we are facing. But I do want to go directly where the sources of the problems are, Madam Deputy Speaker. Because, you know, I find it surprising that the opposition wants us to treat the Western Cape as if it's an island. The Western Cape is part of South Africa. And any challenges that we are facing nationally from the national government have a huge impact in this province. Now, when presenting his adjustment budget on Tuesday, Minister Mener painted a very disturbing picture about our economy. And he spoke about the unprecedented uncertainty in our economy. It's a reality that many people are grappling with. This reminded me of the words by one of the economists, South African economist, Thabi Leoka, at the recent World Economic Forum hosted by South Africa. She describes South Africa as a beautiful home with dysfunctional family in which kids are fighting, parents are fighting, the house is dirty with dishes all over, but we want to invite guests. Now, those words stuck with me because she was describing the situation that we are in South Africa. Mr. Speaker, it's now been almost 2 years since Cyril Ramaphosa was elected as the president of the ANC in Nasrec. Almost 22 months ago, he delivered his inaugural speech as the president of the country with much fanfare, in which he promised us a new dawn. He reignited the hope of many South Africans with the Tumamina slogan. Madam Deputy Speaker, I must be honest with you, and many of you know this. I've never had faith in President Ramaphosa. But as a patriot, I rallied behind the call to preach the message of hope for our country, to redeem ourselves as a nation and attract much-needed investment to grow the economy and create jobs that are so desperately needed by millions of South Africans who are unemployed. Unfortunately, that hope has been dashed by President Ramaphosa and the ANC, Deputy Speaker. My lack of faith in him has been proven right. Despite all the noises and investment summits, the country is getting worse under the ANC leadership. Now, just between the 29th of last month and now, this is what has happened in South Africa, Deputy Speaker. Stats SA, on the 29th of October, Stats SA releases quarterly labor survey indicating that unemployment rate has increased to the worst situation in 11 years under this current president. After the National Minister of Finance medium-term budget policy statement on the 30th of October, the rand weakened. On the 1st of November, rating agency Moody's changed our investment status from stable to negative. Now I heard the opposition members making a joke. I heard the opposition members making a joke about Moody's on Tuesday. But let me be frank here. Whatever you may think about Moody's, but investment.
Order, members.
Now investors do listen to Moody's. And they base their decision to invest in South Africa on the basis of what the Moody's is saying. On the 14th of November, again, Stats SA reported that inequality has worsened for black Africans under the ANC government. And Member Kondlo confirmed that. No, in South Africa. Now, if you look at
Order,
this,
members.
This is not talking about the Western Cape. This report that was produced by Stats SA is talking about South Africa. Last week's settlement between government and NUMSA after the industrial action by SA workers will further deepen our crisis, which is exactly what we've seen in all our SOEs, especially ESCOM. Some may claim that the ANC under Ramaphosa must be given a chance. I would argue that this would be a chance to make things even worse, Deputy Speaker. Truth be told, we don't have an economic crisis in South Africa. We have ANC crisis and leadership crisis under the ANC. While they are busy with ideological debate on how to solve our problems, the situation is getting worse under the ANC. We can no longer make excuses and blame global markets for failing to grow the economy, Deputy Speaker. The real issue here and the reason why the country is not growing, it's because we have bad leadership and bad party that is managing the economy of South Africa. Now, the hardest hit industry, which contributed to high unemployment rate, is the construction industry, Deputy Speaker. Last year around this time, this industry lost 163,000 jobs. And again, this year, this industry lost 24,000 jobs. Now, this industry is really bleeding. That's why in the last 3 weeks, I convened a dialogue with the construction industry in the Western Cape to talk about the programs that we have to stimulate our economy. And the solution, of course, is to make sure that we embark on a massive infrastructure investment drive so that we can stimulate the economy and create jobs that is needed by many people. When Minister Maynard announced budget adjustments on Tuesday, he struck a good balance between cushioning the social cluster and infrastructure investment in order to achieve this. And of course, I will be sharing more specific details when I table the adjustment budget for my department next week. Deputy Speaker, this morning we've heard of a very tragic incident where 18 coaches and 2 trains were burnt down in the Central Line in the city of Cape Town. And we know how important it is, the rail transport for our economy. And this has a negative impact, particularly for a number of poor people who are using this mode of transport. But I must also say, Deputy Speaker, that the only way for government, because we know that the operational control of PRASA and rail is with national government. And I made a commitment immediately after my appointment that we need to work together to solve this problem. Because the people who are getting affected when these things are happening are the people of the Western Cape. And therefore, I find it really, really disturbing that there's this constant pushback from PRASA and the National Department of Transport, where we are needed most by the people of this province to put our heads together to solve this problem. Today's events demonstrate that our rail system continues to be under attack and is battling to retain its rightful place as the backbone of the public transport. The Central Line is core to this. The province, the city, and PRASA partnership, which resulted in the formation and deployment of rail enforcement unit over the last years, yielded positive results in many aspects. We intend to continue to work with PRASA in this partnership to connect this to the use of technology to aid in security and Central Line and deployment of REU. We will continue to work through the Rail Management Task Team, that is chaired by myself, to build on the partnership and identify our measures that can be implemented in order for us to solve this problem. It is critical, Deputy Speaker, that PRASA makes good on its understanding, on its undertaking to fence off the rail reserve with concrete fences, but we must also make sure that we put additional number of security. We must also make sure that we deal with the failing infrastructure, and these are some of the commitments that were made by PRASA. And unfortunately, this is happening at the time when more trains were supposed to be rolled out before the end of this year or early next year. And I really want to commit here that I will continue working with the National Minister and PRASA so that we can solve this problem. And lastly, Deputy Speaker, I do want to really appeal to the members of this House that we have seen a number of incidents where the Central Line in particular has been affected by this. And I cannot understand, Deputy Speaker, that after so many occurrences of this, that the intelligence cannot assist us to deal and apprehend people who are causing this. And again, we have a war room that was established by Minister Mbalula. And I'm spending a lot of time on this, Deputy Speaker, because it is a very, very important issue for the poor commuters of this province. There's a war room that was established by Minister Mbalula. Minister?
If you can finish off.
The war room that was established by Minister Mbalula must really start to really tell us exactly where the challenges are so that we can put measures in place to deal with this problem. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. I see the Honourable Minister Mania.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition, Cameron Dugmore, is of course right. I did repeat some of what I said earlier this week. And I did so because I wanted to emphasize the fact that we are in deep economic trouble. And I thought that the honourable member needed a refresher course so that he could properly appreciate just how serious our situation is in South Africa. Now, Speaker, don't listen to me. Listen to the IMF. who published a report to which the honourable member referred to earlier, which says, the vulnerable outlook emphasises the urgency of rebuilding policy buffers and implementing reforms to put the economy on a sustainable and inclusive growth path. Failure to implement the needed adjustments in government and in SOE spending and efficiency will worsen, debt dynamics will worsen, and financial stability will be eroded. With delays in structural reforms, growth and social conditions will worsen in South Africa. I hope that the honourable member understands that unless we IMF ourselves, we will be IMF'd by the IMF. Now, the Honourable Mvimbi says that we should leave national government alone. And of course, we will leave national government alone if national government leaves us alone and properly runs our ports, properly runs our rail systems, and provides security of energy supply so that we can be competitive in the Western Cape. Of course, I agree with the honourable member when he says that 59 million rand is not enough to deal with gender-based violence. But the honourable member does not seem to realise that the 59 million rand to which I referred is additional funding to combat gender-based violence in the Western Cape. Now, the Honourable Makamba Botia talks about unemployment. I hope that she will appreciate that we have done more in this province, more than any other province, to create an enabling environment so that the private sector can create jobs. And that is why we have the lowest expanded unemployment rate in the Western Cape, and why we are giving hope to people, especially young people, who do not have jobs or who have given up looking for jobs. The Honourable Brett Heron asks, where is the safety plan? Well, I believe it is on www.westerncape.gov.za. And I have to be, I'm surprised.
Order, members.
The Honourable Heron.
Order, members. Thanks, order, members. Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I was saying I'm surprised that the Honourable Brett Heron and the Honourable Christians oppose the safety plan. We will stay the course, and that is why we will keep our promises, and that is why we have allocated an amount of 130
Order, members.
million
I can't hear.
in the adjustments
Honourable Heron.
budget.
Order, members. It's very difficult for me to hear Honourable Minister from right at the back, so please, if I could have some silence. Thank you very much.
Deputy Speaker, I was saying that I was surprised that the Honourable Brett Heron is opposed to the safety plan. We will stay the course, and we will keep our promises, and that is why we have allocated an additional amount of 130 million rand in the adjustments budget so that we can fight crime, especially violent crime, in the Western Cape. Which brings me to the Honourable Mkondlo, and I associate myself with her comments and her compliments about team finance, and especially the acting head of Provincial Treasury, Jalinda Kantana, and the great job that they have done in preparing this budget at Provincial Treasury. I think I should remind the member that this government, over the past 4 years, has spent about 10.6 billion rand on social development, supporting the poor in the Western Cape. The honourable member takes aim at the 311 million rand in the adjustments budget allocated to infrastructure, but seems to forget that the allocation includes, for example, an education infrastructure grant so that for refurbishment and repairs of the Knysna High School hostel that suffered fire damage in June 2017, and includes roof maintenance and replacement at the Simon van der Stel Primary School, and includes repairs to houses damaged in the Wuppertal fires in Clan William area. I'm surprised that the honourable member is opposed to those allocations. when it comes to which brings me to the Honourable Peter Murray, whose suggestion in respect of the safety plan, I'm sure will be considered and responded to by the Premier. Which brings me to the closing remarks made by the Honourable Dugmore. He's of course right. The safety plan does have, as he puts it, two legs: violence reduction and violence prevention. Of course, I think it's the leader of the opposition that needs a workshop, because he doesn't realize, or does not seem to realize, that violence prevention is ongoing and is already being implemented in the Western Cape. Consider the Department of Health offering a comprehensive first 1,000 days program by health practitioners specifically to mothers and caregivers at risk. Consider the work done by social development, supporting families at risk to use alternatives to violence, reducing substance abuse, and addressing gender-based violence through evidence-based parenting programs and other interventions. Which brings me to my closing remarks, Honourable Deputy Speaker. I began the week by saying that in the Western Cape, we are actually getting things done. We've backed business. We have world-class infrastructure. We have an effective, clean provincial government. We have an award-winning international airport. We are a leading tourism destination. We are a tech capital of the continent. We are home to 4 world-class universities. We have a vibrant culture, amazing climate, and beauty everywhere
Order,
in
members.
the Western Cape,
Order,
which is
members.
why we have a growing economy,
Honourable
and
Bond.
which is why we are giving hope to people, especially young people who do not have jobs in the Western Cape.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. That brings us to the end of the speakers. That completes. Honourable members from the opposition benches, Honourable Barnes, I'm watching you. Can I please have your attention? I'm speaking. Thank you very much. That concludes Honourable Barnes. Honourable members, can I have your attention, please? Both of you, I'm talking to you. Honourable member, I'm talking to you. Okay, thank you. Right, that concludes the debate on the consideration of the principle of the bill. Are there any objections to the approval of the principle of the bill? No objections? No. Honourable member, would you like to put it on into the record?
Into the
Can
record,
you stand up?
the African National Congress objects to the principle of this bill.
All right, that will be noted. The Secretary will now read the bill.
Western Cape Adjustments Appropriation Bill.
Thank you. The House will now deal with the separate votes from now onwards. I now call into adjournment, but before we adjourn, I'd like to inform the members that the CPA General Meeting will commence immediately after the adjournment of the House. And please note that on Monday, the 2nd of December 2019, the proceedings will commence at 10 a.m. And this concludes the business of the day. The House is adjourned.